I guess my question is, should we, as taxpayers, fund this?
Well, I think that, if you like, is the central argument, but it's also the central argument for that if it has been calculated, which I think it has been calculated, that the cost of treating a smoker for the various effects of smoking is actually more expensive than prescribing 1 or 2 courses of e-cigarettes, then it makes financial sense as well as medical sense. And so on those grounds alone, I would actually be in favour. But obviously what you've got to ensure is that somebody who's not smoking doesn't get a prescription for e-cigarettes on the taxpayer, which then makes things worse.
Yeah, you talk about the finances, by the way. Just to give you a heads up, dear viewers, on where we stand with this, the cost of smoking to the NHS in England is estimated to be £2.5 billion a year. But get this, in 2021, tax receipts from tobacco duty in the United Kingdom amounted to approximately £9.96 billion. So they're certainly making more from selling it than they are spending to treat the ills that it's causing. Nick, what's your view?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting idea, the fact that, you know, the tax revenue from cigarettes is so vast. So if you're looking at it from an economic point of view, you might say, well, cigarettes, you know, not bad for the government. I think if we're looking at it from, a sort of holistic view of society, and really we want less cancer, we want less sickness, and that's really what the NHS is there to do, then I think actually I sort of broadly agree with the panel that actually if GPs think this is a thing that can actually bring down smoking, and I'm really struck. I've got 3 kids, and I'm really struck by how they view smoking and how they think it's, you know, almost unfathomable. They just find it completely bizarre and a thing that they would just sort of never think of doing. And if we're really at a point where generationally we can sort of eliminate smoking completely, whilst I understand the argument that you just made precisely, which was how much we make in revenue from taxing cigarettes, if we can get rid of cigarette smoking, I think that would probably be a good thing. And if this is a way to do it, I think that would be positive.
But you see, every day, pretty much every weekday on the show, I talk about the stress and strains of the NHS. I talk about how underfunded it is. In fact, we've all actually had to lock ourselves down for God knows how long to protect the NHS. So when times are really tight and times are really hard, I wonder, this policy of kind of we're gonna give to you an alternate product. So you're still gonna have this addiction of you get to the end of the day, you need this thing to kind of help you relax or whatever it is. So the addictive behaviour is still there, perhaps with a lesser harm associated to it. But where do you draw the line then? So if someone's an alcoholic, I don't know, say that they're damaging themselves, is the next step going to be that actually you can get prescribed a lower alcoholic drink, so a drink with a lower alcoholic volume to try and minimise the harm that you're doing? Because smoking, yes, I do understand addictive behaviour. Before people get in touch and explain addiction to me, I understand it. But it is also a recreational choice for a lot of people. They want to smoke, that's why they do it. Everyone knows by now that it's going to kill you. They all know that you're going to get cancer. They carry on regardless. So where do we draw the line? Should we be looking at prescribing almost lower volume alcohol to alcoholics, or am I just being silly?
Well, I think you have to look at this from the perspective of addiction. So I think if someone presents themselves to their doctor and says, look, I'm smoking 3 packs a day, I want to stop, I know this is bad for me, but smoking is incredibly addictive chemically and psychologically, and they want to stop, and this could be part of a package that the doctor thinks is working, and it's something that's tightly controlled, it's monitored, and it's for those patients who could benefit from it. I think then that's possibly one thing. I think what we can't be doing is just dishing out e-cigarettes to anybody who says, oh, I'm a smoker and I want to quit on taxpayers' money.
I don't think they would do that. I think there's going to be checks and balances, and I think it will be a clinical decision made from your doctor or whoever. You go in there, you got your problems, and this is a prescribed, almost like a medicine. But yes, I want people to do themselves less harm. Yes, I want less people to smoke, but I don't know whether it's just because maybe I've got a psychological thing that I associate a vape with, like, I don't want to say a cool thing to do, because I don't think it's cool. I think it's, I'm not involved in that kind of thing. I don't do it. But to me, it just feels almost recreational to vape. And I just, as a taxpayer, maybe I'm an awful individual, but as a taxpayer, I don't think I want to fund for someone else to vape. Am I being unkind, unpleasant?
Well, I think maybe you're not looking closely enough at the figures, because I think the figures are really the argument. But you could, I mean, when you talked about alcohol, and maybe, you know, in a way, the Chancellor's budget actually sort of came a little way towards doing that by reducing the tax on low alcohol drinks and raising it on higher alcohol drinks. So in a way, that's a sort of encouragement, a sort of nudge to drink lower alcohol things that are not as bad for you as the rest.
You raise a good point, actually, Nick. We're talking there about the price of alcohol based on the volume. And I know in places like Scotland, you have a minimum unit, whatever it's called, I'm talking off the top of my head, but you have a minimum alcohol unit price, which pushes up various things. So maybe you should, because I always wonder about the tobacco industry and the role that they play here, and the role and the obligation on them to actually make their own product less harmful. I think I wonder, are they doing enough?
Well, I think that's a good point, but I think actually, if they can feel like moving away from tobacco and then moving into vaping much more, and there's some extent of profit there. I mean, there's probably a similar thing to fossil fuels. What do we do about, you know, petroleum-based companies? How do we make sure that they kind of, you know, in the transition away from the old way of doing things, that they're somehow included so that they're not fighting against you? I think that probably that's generally a good idea. I don't think that's an explanation entirely for why vaping on the NHS should happen, but I think I just really look at this as, can we eliminate smoke? Is this a way to eliminate smoking over the next sort of 10 to 20 years? If it is, I think it's probably a good idea.
Do you think it is?
I think, again, I'm sort of coming from a completely unmedical background. I'm not a doctor. I mean, I don't know. If I would be convinced by a paper that might tell me so.
Well, I'll just give the viewers as well, because I looked into this topic, I've got to say. It's estimated that 3.6 million people currently use e-cigarettes, and most of them ex-smokers. When it comes to smokers that are trying to quit, more than 1 in 4 smokers rely on vapes rather than things like nicotine replacement therapy, you know, like the patches or the gum or whatever it is. And just to put a few numbers on this, the global annual death toll from tobacco use is 7 million. That's 7 million people. That includes secondary exposure to, you know, exposure to secondary smoke. But still, 7 million people a year globally dying because of tobacco use. I find it astonishing. And to your point, by the way, you're absolutely right, Nick, because the percentage of people that have never smoked, I think it sounds around 60 or so percent now. I've never, including me, by the way, I've never smoked a cigarette. I've never understood it. I always think it's quite gross, actually, the thought of inhaling tar. I've never, ugh. Anyway, Gareth's been in touch on the email saying e-cigarettes should be banned, he says, along with tobacco, because, Gareth, I'm not really sure of your scientific view here, but apparently, according to Gareth, they spread COVID. Not really sure on that. I'd love to know your scientific source on that, Gareth, so do get back in touch. Richie on the email says, can I have a decent red wine on prescription every night? He says, no, of course I can. So why then should we offer vapes? I guess that comes back to my point of, at the end of the day, everyone has their own habits of relaxation, isn't it? James on Twitter says, yes, of course NHS should give e-cigarettes. How is it any different from nicotine patches? Peter says, well, if you can afford cigarettes, then surely you can afford to buy e-cigarettes. Why should we fund you? Simon says, do you remember back in the days when the world thought that cigarettes were safe? Indeed. Well, keep on bringing in your reaction. But let's move on to a different topic. Conversion therapies. This is, I've got to say, this is in the press today. It's quite a complex topic, but it's basically any form of treatment or psychotherapy which aims to change a person's sexual orientation. Well, now this could be made into a criminal offence. This is part of government measures to ban the coercive practice. So the government has launched a 6-week consultation inviting views on how to legislate against this practice. So when it comes to conversion therapy, should it be illegal? Mary?
Well, I think this is such a complicated topic because it sounds as though there is an obvious answer to this. And the obvious answer is, yes, of course it should be illegal. To coerce anybody to do anything should be illegal, and this as much as anything else. But I think there are a lot of, I mean, loopholes is not the right word, but there are a lot of sort of exceptional circumstances that you can imagine here, because one of the exceptions that I would actually advance would be what happens when what's described as the behavioural therapy or the talking therapy is from a church, and somebody has sought it voluntarily, that they want to do it, and they're over 18, they're an adult, they're of the age of majority. I think that religion is a very, very difficult area to legislate in. Somehow it doesn't completely come under the law. It's something that belongs in a different category. And so I think for the law to say that people should not be able to seek out conversion therapy if they're adults, I think that's a very difficult thing to do. And I think it would be a very difficult thing to legislate for, even more difficult to enforce. And I'm not sure that enforcement would even be desirable in those circumstances.
Yeah, and one of the aspects of this, because it is, when you actually sit and drill into it, it's not the consultation and the topic, etc. It's not as straightforward as it perhaps might seem. And it's the announcement today, it's got quite a bit of criticism, because one of the things that the government has said is that individuals should, and I'm quoting here, a direct quote, individuals should remain free to seek out professional help and guidance, saying that I can't say that long word. This is a long word. It's Friday afternoon. I tell you, it's been a big week. I'm going to give up. What they want to basically make illegal would be the coercive aspect. And if someone wants to voluntarily have this, the government is saying that perhaps this should be fine. Many people, Gavin, have actually said no. Actually, the whole thing should just be illegal. You shouldn't be able to try and change someone's sexuality using talking therapies, or, I mean, you already can't use violence or anything like that. That's already illegal, so that's kind of done dusted, that bit. But the more talking therapy to try and change this, and it has got a bit of criticism.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think the distinction you just made is really important. We are here just talking about verbal interactions between people. Thank goodness we're not talking about anything beyond that. That's already illegal. That's already a crime. Mm-hmm. But on the issue of coercion that you mentioned, it seems to me as though Liz Truss, the Minister of State for Women and Equalities, has really, I think, got this about right, which is that if you're dealing with someone who is under the age of 18 and therefore they don't necessarily have legal free will in that sense, or you're dealing with someone who's got impaired capacity for some psychological reason or whatever it may be, then that's completely unacceptable. But when you're dealing with just two adults with legal and mental capacity essentially having a conversation, then that is something which historically the state has never actually intervened and said we're going to stop this. And we wouldn't want to see a situation necessarily in which someone can't go and just have a discussion with, for example, their rabbi, their priest or their imam, and that to be capable of being criminalised.
Yeah, and one of the aspects the government is talking about today as well is making it illegal to almost profit from this endeavour. So if you've got someone that's kind of offering paid services or charged services where someone can come, you mentioned there a religious setting where someone might go talk to, I don't know, their priest or whatever. I imagine in that scenario, no money would change hands. But in the scenario where you go to a paid therapist, the government is proposing actually taking that profit and well, confiscating it. I guess I don't know what they do with it, but making it illegal to profit from this. What's your thoughts, Nick?
I think this is sort of, you can look at this, having looked at what the government's proposing, I think it's relatively sensible. So I think, they're saying under 18, no, which I think is actually completely sensible. And then they're saying for over 18s that someone can't profit on this. So basically, they're sort of almost applying a sort of Trade Description Act thing to this, saying conversion therapy is not really possible. Actually, people kind of doing this, it's a scam. That's my interpretation of it. And I think my view on that is fair enough.
And do you think, I'm just trying to, because, there's a whole conversation at the moment about how much someone can be changed and how much somebody should be accepted for who and what they are. We have all conversations, don't we, these days, whether it's about gender, whether it's sexuality, whether it's gender identification. And I do think there's this whole kind of switch now in conversation, because things that we just used to accept as fact before, previously, it almost seems like anything now is up for conversation. And I noticed today there was more conversation in the press again around adults. So if there was an adult that was trying to help or encourage a child to change gender, that could be made illegal as well. This is all around a conversation around puberty blockers. So I do think the times, Mary, are changing, aren't they, for sure?
Well, I think we're in a very difficult transitional period at the moment where none of these things have really been resolved. And you know, the whole issue of gender in particular, and identity, and how far these things mesh, and how far things are fluid, those were, I mean, this sort of thing wasn't even recognised publicly, even maybe 5-10 years ago. Whereas now it's something that's a subject of quite open conversation. And I think maybe we just have to let it run its course. But I do think that what you're looking at are not people who are confident in their identity as to which gender or fluid gender or whatever. What we're talking about here with this potential legislation is people who are not confident, people who either are looking for help or people who are regarded as needing help by other people. And I think that's really quite dangerous territory. And it's dangerous territory to legislate for. I think that's the problem.
Yeah, Nick, Mary mentions people looking for help. I think it's almost this kind of almost like a generational divide and split now. I think the younger generation, they are more kind of confident, accepting of themselves and who they are. And there is a problem with other people, sometimes older generations in their lives, being as accepting of who they say that they are.
Yes, but I mean, if you're going to try and apply that to conversion therapy, the whole idea of conversion therapy is you don't know who you are, and actually you're very confused, and can someone change you from being whatever it is, you know, one sexuality, whatever it is, to another? And it's interesting, you know, when you're talking about generational gaps, I sort of thought there was a period 10 years ago where we would felt completely confident in saying people are who they are, you know, people are born gay, they're gay, that's it. And it's interesting that this has kind of come back in the way that it has. That's just interesting to me.
Yeah, it is interesting. James has got in touch on Twitter saying, I totally agree. If someone wants to try converting themselves to another sexuality with help, fine. But cajoling someone to be either straight or something else, James says, should be highly illegal, especially if there is a power imbalance. As I was just mentioning, a 6-week consultation has just been opened on this. I wonder, my final question, I guess, is how interested do you think the public are in this conversation? How well responded to do you think that consultation is going to be?
I think it's very interesting. I think all of these questions to do with gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, obviously they are intrinsically important. I do sometimes think that the Westminster bubble can become over-preoccupied with these issues. And I think, you know, perhaps not so much on the conversion therapy, but I think on the gender identity and the transgender agenda. I think the views of the general public, the average views amongst the general public, probably not quite the same as the average view in Westminster. So I think there is a difference there. And I think the degree of priority that the general voter gives to it tends to be quite a lot lower as well.
Well, you tell me, you viewers, you are voters. What priority do you put to this issue? Because as we've just been discussing there, it's certainly got a lot of people talking. It's in a lot of the news outlets today. Is it on your mind? Is it what you're going to be talking to your mates about when you go to the pub this weekend? Get in touch and let me know. When we come back, I'm going to have a quick break. When I come back, I'm going to be asking you, whose responsibility do you think it is to keep kids safe on the internet?
On Tonight Live with me, Mark Dolan, snooker legend Dennis Taylor. In The Clash, should we scrap HS2? American showbiz legend Perez Hilton on a career dishing the dirt on celebs. And we'll speak to a top smoking expert on whether vaping should be free on the NHS. And in my monologue, ignore the critics. Brexit will be a success. And health workers should not be forced to have the vaccine to keep their job. That's my view. What's yours? See you at 9.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News for To The Point.
Good evening, welcome back. Let me ask you, do you remember this?
Charlie and I were in the park. Then this man came up and said, would I like to see some puppies? And I said yes. And I was going to go, but Charlie stopped me. He says never go anywhere with men or ladies you don't know.
Do you remember that? What about this one?
Hi there. Uh-oh, this looks dangerous. Will they see that car? Think I better have a word with those two. That wasn't very clever, was it? If you'd been looking and listening all the way across, that wouldn't have happened.
Well, obviously, I'm way too young, so no, I don't remember either of them. However, some of you might remember them. That was essentially public health safety videos, adverts, whatever you want to call them, focusing on core dangers to children, crossing the road, stranger danger, that kind of whole campaign, because then, back in those days, about the 70s that was the main risk to children. And it was seen as almost like a public health issue to some extent, educating those children about the risks that they faced. Now, the reason that I'm talking about this and showing you those clips, because fast forward now to 2001, and the risks that affect children, of course, they've still got to learn how to cross the road, they still need to try and stay away from strangers, etc. But the world of the internet is something that potentially can be a huge risk to children if not managed properly. Now, there's talk today about whose responsibility is it to keep children safe on the internet, and specifically about teaching them about everything and the risks online. The head of the Internet Watch Foundation has warned, basically, as MPs continue to hear evidence on the online safety bill. There's lots of rules, isn't there, about internet, forcing internet companies to better protect their users. There's a lot of focus on the companies and what they need to do. But is it the company's responsibility? Is it the government's responsibility? Is it schools' responsibility to teach children about the risks? Or is it good old-fashioned parenting? What do you think, Gavin?
Well, I think we were talking earlier about how, culture changes throughout the generations. And I think, first and foremost, this does have to be the responsibility of parents. But also, because of this generational divide, not all parents necessarily feel 100% confident or as though they fully understand the nature of social media and the potential threats that exist out there on the internet. According to the National Crime Agency, there are 300,000 people out there that present some kind of sexual threats to children via the internet. And we've also got a society in which the majority of under-7s have a phone. And so I really think there is a problem out there, and I think it's definitely one where schools and parents do need to work together. We are living in a different world, and I think schools do have to play a part in that.
Yeah, and Nick, you mentioned earlier when we talk about smoking that you've got children, and as a parent trying to navigate children through this, I mean, I've got one, but he's only one, so I'm kind of a few years away from that. But it is quite a different ball game now to that era there that I was just showing you.
Yeah. And it's a constant concern. You know, what your kids are online a lot of the time. How are they going to deal with dangers? And I agree. You'd hope that the parents would deal with it. I mean, we certainly talk to our kids all the time about online safety. You know, watch for this if someone comes, and just the risks that are there. People who might pose as children, who are really grown-ups. The worry is that the fact of the matter is we just have a lot of parents who just aren't doing that sort of thing for various reasons. You look at, if I look at my kids' school, there's kids who come in and they're barely parented at all. Let's be just brutally frank when they come to school. So the idea that they're being taught how to deal with online safety is just, it's not happening. So I think actually the schools doing just some very basic things would be extraordinarily helpful. Just some very basic things about online safety that I don't think would be in any way controversial, that could be completely depoliticized, really. It would literally just be about watch out for this, watch out for this, watch out for this. And I think actually that could be very helpful.
What do you think, Mary? Do you think it should be something that's featured within schools?
I mean, I tend to agree that this is business for parents, especially, we're talking, I think, about children between the age of 5 and 10. We're not talking about anything like up to teenagers. And I really think this is the prime responsibility of the parents. And the idea that children between the age of 5 and 10 are looking at their own phones, they've got access to screens in the absence of their parents, outside the framework of the family. I think, I really don't see, schools have enough to do without teaching this sort of thing, at least until it's standard for the children concerned to be having access to phones and screens. So I would say, from secondary school, from 11, 12, yes, fine. Below that, I think that's the family. Yeah,
see, the thing is, Mary, my instinct is to agree with you. I think you should go to school, your kids should go to school, they should learn to read, they should learn to write, they should learn to do maths or whatever. However, now that I'm a mum myself, what I'm realising is sometimes that's an idealistic view of the world, because to echo Nick's point, and I'm going to be slightly more blunt than Nick, there's a lot of parents out there that are absolute morons. Not only are they moronic, they're actually quite neglectful and lazy when it comes to parenting, and they are so burn idle that some of them don't even give their children breakfast before they go to school. Some of children go to school, primary school, some of them are not toilet trained. This is poor parenting. So when you've got that kind of calibre of person being a parent, because anyone can be a parent these days, then actually I don't think that the child should suffer because of this moronic behaviour and awful behaviour in some cases by their parents. So I think that I almost challenge my own belief system here, because I just think it's parenting, basic parenting. But when that's not happening, then I do think personally that the school should step in and should provide. It's just basic safety, I think.
I'd just say, Michelle, that coming in on just a very brief point, which is I think there tends to be an overlap actually between the sort of bad parents and the ones who are much more likely to give their 4-year-old an iPhone. That's my personal experience. Like kid's 5, he's got an iPhone. It's almost like, I don't want to parent the kid, here's a phone. So
like a babysitter.
So those kids are under the most risk, I think.
Yeah. Get in touch and let me know what you think, because I have to say you've heard different views here. Mary is very much of the mindset that it's the parents' job. I've got to say I share that view. However, as I keep saying, there are an awful lot of bad parents out there. So what do you do when someone's a bad or lazy parent? Do you leave their child to potentially be exposed to, I don't know, paedophilia or grooming or violence or whatever it is? I think that those children should be protected, and if they can't be protected by their parents, then they should be protected protected by their school. But I want to know your thoughts. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk, or of course you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews, but get in touch and let me know your thoughts. Also, as well, you might have seen some breaking news tonight. The Queen, we updated a few days ago, didn't we, that she wasn't going to attend COP26. She was hospitalised for an evening, I think it was a week or so ago, and now she's been advised to rest for a further 2 weeks. Your thoughts on that, Gavin?
I mean, whenever there's negative news about the Queen or her health, I always get really worried really quickly, like I'm sure most of the nation does. I mean, many people are told, take 2 weeks to take it easy. I'm 33 years old and in otherwise good health, and I've been told that by a doctor, so hopefully it doesn't mean anything too bad. The only thing is the palace does tend to keep a relatively tight grip on things coming out of what's going on in the palace, and the fact that this has been briefed out to the papers does make one wonder, is there something else that's going on? I hope not. There used to be a law about 400 years ago, which was that if you contemplated the death or something bad happening to the monarch, it was actually treason. Maybe it's time to bring that back, because I hope that the Queen just lives forever. So.
I don't want to be the person that disappoints you. But, yeah, I mean, I won't tell you the end of that story there, but unfortunately, no one lives forever, do they, Nick? And she is a 95-year-old lady, and I have to say, does very well for a 95-year-old lady. When you see, she seems a very independent lady still, very strong lady, but nonetheless, as I said, 95 now.
Well, we can only hope that Her Majesty's fine, and I think that's all we can really do. And the 2 weeks, hopefully that's just a precaution, and she'll be fine. I think that's all we can do.
Yeah, Mary, your thoughts?
Well, I think that in the weeks after the Duke of Edinburgh died, I mean, she looked absolutely spectacular. I mean, I really could not understand how she could operate so brilliantly in those weeks, and now partly because of that, I think it's come as such a shock that that suddenly she seems mortal. And of course, to be told by the medics to take it easy for 2 weeks, 2 weeks is quite a long time, and it makes it sound quite serious. But if you wanted to take a slightly more cynical view of it, of course, the last thing that anybody wants to happen on a national level is for a major development on the palace front while the whole of the world is in Glasgow. That would be just catastrophic. Yeah. So I think maybe keeping a low profile under doctor's orders probably suits quite a lot of people.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned there the Duke of Edinburgh as well, and immediately I just had that flashback of that image. Do you remember when we saw the Queen completely on her own, basically, at the funeral? I'll never forget that image. And of course, we wish her well and hope that she is as well as can be. Let's move on. It's a Friday evening, so, on a Friday evening, you do have to try and end with something a little bit upbeat, steer yourself into the weekend in a happier frame of mind than you once was, I think, anyway. And today, you might have seen the chatter about Facebook. Apparently, people say, they've rebranded as Meta. Well, they haven't, really. What they've done is they've got a corporate head, if you like, and what they've done is they've decided to call that Meta because, according to Mark Zuckerberg, this is basically the future. Facebook is one small product of a metaverse, or whatever they're calling it, where it's all about virtual reality and it's all about this and it's all about that. Anyway, if you are indeed interested in that, I'll leave you to Google it as that can be your weekend's homework, should I say. But the point I mentioned this on this Friday evening is because it got me thinking about other things that have changed their name. There's been quite a lot of companies, by the way, who've done so. I've got some graphics here, lots of different companies. Let's have a little look at one, see if you can guess. So this was a former name of a well-known organisation. Can anyone guess what used to be called Backrub? I mean, the clue is in the logo, gang. They're all looking blankly. This panel.
Google.
Yes.
Google. Yeah, it must be
Thank
Google.
goodness.
Yeah.
I'm looking at them thinking, surely they're going to get this. The logo is very obvious. But no, my panel didn't get it. Did you get it at home? Let's guess again. This one is not so obvious. This was the former name of a very, very well-known drink. So formerly Brad's drink. What do you think it is currently known as, panel? Or anyone
Pepsi?
at home? Yes!
Pepsi, yeah.
Pepsi. Nick straight in there with Pepsi. Have we got another one? Let's see. Blue Ribbon Sports. Can anyone guess what this used to be? This is a very well-known sports brand. You will all know it. Blue Ribbon Sports.
Is it Nike?
Yes.
Yeah.
I wish that I had some kind of buzzer to celebrate the achievements on the panel. I've got to say, it would be a bit lacklustre. I think we got 1 out of about 2 out of 4, I think we got there. Anyway, lots of companies change their name, don't they? It celebrates a new era. You might remember Marathon. Marathon changed to Snickers, I think, if I got this the right way around. It was Marathon, then it went to Snickers, then there was an outcry, and it went back to Marathon.
But it's only, I think it's only just going back to Marathon.
Is it?
Snickers, it borrowed from the US.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I don't understand why they did it.
Yeah, and the one that I ranted about at the start, which is Urple Fruits, nothing wrong with Urple Fruits, and then they tinkered with it and made it Starburst.
It did, yeah.
I still go on about that. Not quite over it, as you can probably tell. Almost time to go, but nonetheless, has anyone else got a name-sharing story that's annoyed them or that they want to share?
Well, there's one about Netflix, and they changed. A lot of brand stuff that you'll see in the 21st century will be about. I mean, it will obviously be about money making. But it won't be about rebranding the whole product, because obviously you've got a brand name, you've built it up. But Netflix launched a sort of thing where they, like a physical, so you had Netflix, which was, Netflix as we know it.
This has got to be a short story, by the way.
This is a short story, I promise.
Frankie,
I promise.
I'm off air in a minute.
There's a DVD, they wanted a DVD branch, and they called it something silly. Anyway, they closed it down after a week, because people said, well, we have to, because basically it was trying to get people to sign up to 2 services. And they didn't like it. And that's often what rebranding
There
is.
you go. That is a story, dear viewers, that you can tell your mates in the pub on Friday. Do tell them that story and let me know their response to it, won't you? Anyway, anything else that's changed name that you like or dislike, get in touch with me. That's all we've got time for right now. Gavin, Nick, Mary, thank you for your company tonight, and thank you for yours. As I mentioned, it's Friday, which means the weekend, which means I'll be back on Monday. You have yourselves a good one. I'll see you Monday, 6 o'clock until 7 o'clock.
Hello, we've seen some exceptional rainfall totals over recent days, and we have yet more rain in the forecast, so a number of weather warnings are in force right the way through this weekend and into the start of next week. And the reason things are quite so unsettled is this large area of low pressure in the Atlantic, and it's sweeping weather fronts right the way across the country. And tonight is no exception. Yet another weather front waiting in the wings. Some really heavy downpours associated with this one, particularly through tonight across western parts of the country. Because of all the cloud associated with this weather front, it shouldn't be a particularly cold night, although there will be some clear skies either side, allowing temperatures to dip a little. So as we start the weekend then, a very wet start for Saturday across western areas, and this band of rain will gradually start to move its way eastwards as we head through the day on Saturday. Now eventually it will start to clear away from the east, and much brighter conditions following on behind. That's not to say it will be completely dry. Always the chance of a blustery shower, but there will be some drier spells in between, and certainly a glimpse of the sunshine at times. But yet another band of rain will be quick to follow on behind, so a clear night for many on Saturday, but yet another weather front starting to edge in from the west as we head through the early hours of Sunday morning. And don't forget that this is also when the clocks go back. So again, it will be a very wet start to the day for some of us on Sunday, and that rain once again gradually pushing its way north and eastwards as we head through the day. And similarly to Saturday, we will see brighter conditions following on behind. So brighter skies as we head through Sunday afternoon, particularly in the west, but yet again, the chance of some very blustery showers, and some of those could well turn thundery, and it remains unsettled into the start of next week.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.